starting now with a panel because when we were looking at the sorts of assessment tools that everybody was using, there's clearly lots of different assessment tools being used. So we asked all of the people who were using various tools to tell us a little bit about it, and rather than have one presentation after another which says this piece of software is really great, try using it, we thought if we could get them to briefly explain what it was that they used, and then to explain why they used it, and have most of the time for you guys to say, well look, I do this in my practice, which of those tools is going to suit me, would be most useful to you all. So they all agreed to do a panel, and I'm really grateful to them for that, because it leaves it really much more organic, and that's a bit scary, not having that structure. So they're all going to take about 5-10 minutes to describe the technologies that they've been using in their assessment practice, and then we're going to open out the rest of the session to you so that you can see how what they are doing might suit what you want to do in your practice. So I'm going to hand over to Roger first of all, who's going to tell us about MCQs.
Okay, thank you. Come back on, all right, well I'll start talking. I'm Roger Bird from Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, and Angela and I are going to be on the panel, but I'm just going to talk briefly about two pieces of software that we use for various reasons. One is called MCQ Results, that developed out of an application I wrote many years ago, a standalone application for marking MCQs and giving staff some useful statistics about them. And then subsequently, Daniel Exeter and Chris Shue at School of Population Health developed a really neat way of giving students feedback using a standalone application. And several years ago we combined the two into this thing called MCQ Results, which is a web-based application that anyone in the university has access to, and several in the room probably already using. The second I'm going to talk about that Angela and I and others have had experience with comes out of something that Andrew Eberhardt started using and appointed us to a couple of years ago, called Remark Office OMR. And so I'm just going to very quickly go through the steps involved in using these two pieces of software and the tools, and then that'll give you a bit of a hint on what questions we might have during the panel. So MCQ Results, we use it for marking MCQ tests, for generating stats that we can get some judgment on the tests, actually also for combining versions, if we do multiple versions into a single version to get the stats from, and importantly for giving students rapid and personalised feedback. So I'm going to show you the process of how you do it and some of the sort of feedback that you're able to give very quickly, and the way students appreciate that. So the first step is you design your test, and students sit that test, and they will sit it using a feedback system which is either Scantron sheets or Teleform sheets that you've designed the test with. And both of those are used throughout the university. You then put those through your Scantron machine, or you send them to the scanning office, and they send you back an electronic file of all the student answers. You could tweak this a little bit by adding a few lines at the beginning that MCQ Results needs, which has your correct answers and some decoding information if you've got multiple versions that you're wanting to combine. And then you simply upload that to the MCQ Results web application. You'll have had to set up in advance, maybe it was 5 minutes work to just set up the course for that particular test. MCQ Results will then check that the students' IDs are correct and all the data makes sense, and then give you answers that you can review, generate some simple stats that allow you to say whether these are valid questions or not, check things, give you a distribution. You use all of this to decide then, is this okay, or do I need to delete some questions and remark it, which the system will allow you to do very easily. Once you're happy with it, you can then download the results, upload them to Canvas, or do what you need to do with them. But importantly also at that point, click a button that will send personalised feedback to all the students. It's taken me about 2 minutes to explain that process. The fastest person that's managed to get through it is Angela, with a course of about 150 students, 2 hours after the students sat the test, they all had an email of their personal feedback. None of us have got quite that close before, but typically you can do it within a day or a week, depending on your overview system. So this is some of the feedback that you as a staff member get, and this is showing you some of the simple stats. So you've got a Cooter-Richardson reliability measure for the test itself, but you've also got difficulty and validity measures for each question. And just to show you a couple, you can see this question 2 was not very difficult. It's got a low score there, but it's nevertheless valid at discriminating between the good and the bad students. Question 6, higher difficulty score, fewer students got it right, but it still was also even better at discriminating between the good and the bad students. And staff typically use that data to check whether there's a question in there that might be answered poorly, or that they constructed wrongly, or something to that effect. The students get feedback that you create simply by entering what we call learning points about each question. Rather than giving them the questions back, you tell them what the area of the question was, and they get an email to this effect that tells them whether they got it right or wrong, which you can see on the right-hand red or green column, and also the percentage of the class who got it right or wrong. And you can set this up very easily for each student to get this fed back. And you can give them the overall class distribution as well if you wish. You choose not to if you don't want them to see it, but they get all this information emailed to them. Students find it very useful, particularly because you can do it very rapidly. And here's some comments that Angela had from one of her courses. The timeliness was amazing, instant feedback was handy. I'd finished and there I knew the gaps in my knowledge, helped me study. And it was useful because it focused on the concepts rather than the specific question. Another person who similar sort of thing found the feedback was really useful. They'd look at whether they got it right or wrong and then try to think what the question was, but then realise the feedback was about the general concept and the learning involved. And the point they make at the bottom is something that some students learn a bit too late. I wish I'd known this 6 months ago. And somebody else saying that seeing the percentage that got it right allowed them to determine whether they scored well in the difficult questions or not. So we've had a lot of feedback from students who've had this sort of electronic feedback to them to tell us that it's really very useful to them because it helps their subsequent study. We can talk about that a bit more later on. The other piece of software is a commercial piece of software, as I said, that Andrew pointed us to, this Remark Office OMR. And what it's useful for doing is for reading answers constructed in a particular way using bubbles that are filled in by pencil or pen, reading barcode information that you might have on your answer forms, and we'll see why in a moment, and also getting hold of text boxes. It can look at translating written text and handwritten writing into text, but it's not very good at that. But we use it for collecting a screenshot effectively of the text. It has very good error checking facilities, and we also use it for generating spreadsheets of results. So how do you use this? Well, you have to buy the software, and it's not super cheap, but once you've got it, the first thing you do is you design your test using the software that allows you to put bubbles that students or staff can fill in with pencil or pen and barcodes and things on it. And I'll show you this in more detail in a moment. Having designed the test, you print it. The students then sit the test and they fill in their answers on the test paper, and that you then collect. And one of the ways that we use it well is by having questions on different sheets that different markers will use. So we'll split it apart and give the question pages to different markers. They then mark it, and I'll show you in a moment how they feedback their results. But essentially then we collect these pages, put them through a scanner to get a PDF version of all the answers with the markers mark on them, and then put that through the OMR software that very nicely reads all the markers' responses and collates them into a spreadsheet for us. So we get out of this effectively a spreadsheet of all the marks that the markers have given. But we also have a PDF of every student's answers as well. That allows us to do a number of things. And just to show you the sort of a couple of ways, we use them in a number of ways, a couple of ways we use them up at Grafton. Here's a test that we've designed. We've got a barcode at the top, which is unique to each test paper. So every page of this has the same barcode, different from the next test paper, which allows us to recollate the results very quickly. Down the bottom you can see those little bubbles allow the students to fill in their ID in a machine readable way, and then the subsequent pages of this test would look a bit like this. So we've got the barcode to identify the test for this particular question, the question, and a block there that the marker will fill in one of those bubbles to say yes, it's going to be 8 out of 10 or whatever, and the student's answers below it. So these are the things that are read, and we collate the bit at the top there in the red, the answers, or the marks from the markers that go onto the final spreadsheet. Another way we've used it is in some of our postgraduate classes where students assess other students' presentations. And so, wrong button. Here's an example of one of mine for a single sheet that each student gets. The seminar presenter's name's there, and it's also encoded as their ID as a barcode, so it's machine readable. The students doing the assessment fill in their IDs. They then score according to those little score bubbles there. They write comments down the bottom. I put it through the software, collect all this data, and that afternoon feed back to the students their scores and all the comments that their classmates have given, but they're anonymous, so they get a lot of useful feedback very quickly. We use it for a number of other things as well, and here's a list of some of the things we use it for, but it could be beyond that. Tests and exams, as I've said, we've got several markers. The main advantage with us there is turnaround time. When we had to hand boxes around, it took forever, and students complained about the amount of time. Now we can get results back much more quickly. Seminar feedback, assessments and feedback, as I've said. One of the things the faculty's used it for last year and will in the future is interviews for entry to medicine, pharmacy and optometry, where the students do multiple mini interviews, and the interviewers score on these sheets, and we collate it all electronically now. And most recently, in the last year or so, we've taken the PDFs at the end of an exam and then sent those electronically back to the students. So rather than them having to get their exam or ask for their exam scripts, they get them sent back to them electronically using a rather neat piece of software that was it Ron?
Yes.
Developed. Ron Cheong put together, and we just import our PDFs into that and use that to email it back. So that's these two pieces of software in a nutshell, and we'll talk about them more during the discussion. Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Peter Beer, and you might have seen the unicycling Panda Bear when Canvas is busy loading stuff. I'm the unicycling Peter Beer, so you might have seen that. So easy to remember. And I want to talk very, very briefly about Canvas quizzes and SpeedGrader. So both of these are Canvas-based tools. And they're Canvas-based tools that I was interested in using to solve two different problems. And you might have the same kind of problems. So one of the problems is the survey result when you ask students about feedback. And you ask them a question, I received helpful feedback on my learning progress. Do they strongly agree or disagree? And in 2015, there are some people agreeing they got helpful feedback, but quite a few disagreeing and lots of neutrals. And I really wanted to change this picture. I wanted to have people feel like they were getting useful feedback. And so we implemented quizzes, Canvas quizzes, with the idea that you can get instant feedback in terms of, instead of doing an assignment, waiting 2 weeks to get the answers marked, you can do a quiz online and instantly you get the answers back. And so that's what we did, and here's the result. So it certainly improved the answer to that survey question. People really did feel like they were getting helpful feedback. And I should emphasize that we didn't change the kinds of assessments we were setting. We still set the same assignments. What we're doing was using the quizzes to mark them. So that's a little bit different from a lot of people's uses of quizzes. So I give them a paper-based assignment and say, go away and do this. But a lot of the marking is just looking at the final number going, is that right or wrong? Or looking at some step along the way and going, are they on the right track? And so we're pretty much able to automate that by getting them to type in the answers they got at the end of each question, or to select a multi-choice answer, A, B, C or D, which is the right one. So it was essentially used to replace the markers, which is, yay, big money saving. And we didn't just throw that money away, we redeployed the markers as tutors so that there were drop-in clinic sessions. So people would do the quiz on Sunday because it was due on Sunday, so that's when they did it. And then the next day they could rock up to a clinic and get one-on-one personalised help if they needed it. So as you might expect, getting fast feedback rather than waiting 2 weeks when you're on to a different topic, being able to instantly find out what you know and don't, and then get help the very next day is hopefully going to impact on performance. So, performance seems to have improved. There's 2015. We weren't too happy with our 2015 results. This is an engineering part 1 course, about 750 students. And so those are the sort of percentages getting A's, about 25% A's, 35% B's. So it's not terrible, but 10% D's for an engineering course is relatively high because we have a very high entry standard. So if they get into engineering, they really shouldn't be failing unless they're spending their entire life at the pub. So after implementing quizzes, what did we see? Well, it should be emphasised that all the teaching staff for this year had taught on the course the previous year. So there's not much in the way of difference in terms of teaching staff. The main thing we did was this idea with quizzes, and here's what we got. So if you want to halve your fail rate and dramatically increase the number of A's, this seems to be a good tool that you might want to consider using. So what do quizzes look like? They're pretty easy to set up. You're probably, if you've played around with any sort of online quiz tool in the past, it's very similar. You can set up multi-choice questions, you can set up fill-in-the-blank questions, you can set up type in a number kind of question, and students are presented with a quiz that they can do, and you can control whether or not it's a timed quiz, so they might get half an hour to do it, or they might have all the time in the world to do it. So you can configure that and give them a bit of time or all the time. You can allow them to have one attempt or multiple attempts. So some of the quizzes I set up with a very, very large question bank, so it was randomly generating a personalised quiz for every student, so you could have students in the same room and 2 students sitting next to each other and they're getting different questions. And if you go to the effort, which is a lot of effort of setting up a large quiz bank, then they can have as many goes as they want, and they're going to get different questions each time, unless they sit there for 20, 30 goes and start to see some of them come up again. And that allows them to get really fast feedback, go away, improve, and then see whether they understood the concept. So we've got a diagnostics test we run typically in week 3. This year we ran it online as a quiz at the end of week 1. And that was awesome because some of the students realised they didn't have the background knowledge to do the course. And week 1 is fast enough to know about that to withdraw with no loss. So we had people pull out of the course, whereas previously they learnt about, did a test week 3, got the results back in week 4, too late to do anything. So if you're thinking diagnostic quizzes, this is a great tool for letting people know whether maybe they should be doing some other course to bring their knowledge up. So the other way, of course, is not to use a big pool of questions, but to have everyone do exactly the same question. Much faster to write those. You can whack one of those together in an hour or 2, whereas if you're preparing a 600 question bank, you're looking at days of your life, or days of your teaching assistant's life, whichever you prefer. What do students see? When they get to the end of a quiz and submit, instant feedback. So they'll see what ones they got right, there'll be a little green correct, and you can give very valuable feedback to them depending on what they get right, what they get wrong. So you can choose for stuff to display regardless of whether they get it right or wrong. You can, if we look at one where they got it wrong, so this question here, they answered it incorrectly. So it's a really good idea not only to give them what the correct answer is, but maybe a little bit of a guideline of how you'd get to that correct answer. So they can go, oh, I didn't understand it. Here's what I should be thinking about. Here's how I would have got there. And at the very start of using quizzes, I didn't tend to do that, and as I got more experience with the tool, I realized if I could give students feedback on their misconceptions and hopefully correct them, that would be really useful. And the unintended consequence was our drop-in clinics didn't get much use because they could generally get the feedback and figure out where they were going wrong and fix their misconception without having to actually go and talk to another human being. So, yeah, I think that's part of why students did so much better. They were getting that instant feedback and getting pointed. And you can point them to course manuals or whatever. And if you're using multi-choice, it's probably a really, really good idea to give that feedback to them regardless of whether they got it right or wrong, because they might just be guessing. And so, that'd be useful. So I am a big fan of quizzes. There are a few little gotchas. If you make a mistake on a quiz question, that can be really painful to fix. If it's a multi-choice question, you can automatically regrade it, but if it was a fill in the blanks or fill in the numbers kind of thing, then that can cause issues. So proof your questions before releasing them. Maybe even get a colleague to go over them. And what I did end up doing is I'd release it into the wild and then wait watching my email. And when the first student who said, oh, I think there's a typo on question 14, I go and fix that typo, and then everyone else would at least have that fixed, and I could see from the logs who had done those questions already, in what order students had sat the test. So as long as I knew at what time I fixed it, I could go and then manually mark the 10 or 12 early birds who'd done it within an hour of being released. But realistically, 90% of them do it within an hour of it being due, so you're good.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very quick intro to quizzes. The other thing I just wanted to mention briefly is SpeedGrader, which is also built into Canvas. And this is a tool where students can submit their files online electronically, and you can mark it online. And of course, this dramatically decreases the amount of paper you have to schlep around. No more do students queue up to stick their assignments in a box and then have to queue up for hours to pick up their marked assignments, which half of them don't do because it's a pain. Now they just get their assignments submitted online. It's easy peasy for them to do, even if it's like a paper-based one, which this one is. They can just scan it with one of the university's photocopy machines, or with their home printer, or with their smartphone. There's very good software available where you just sit there, take photos of your documents, it puts it together into a PDF, and you can submit that. So once we told them about CamScanner, which was a nice little piece of software they could install on their smartphones, only about 1% of them had issues with submitting the first assignment. And after that, pretty much no issues at all. So students can submit even sort of hard copy things just by taking photos or running it through a scanner. So it's easy for them. They really appreciated not having to come physically to a hand-in box and being able to do it from at home if they wanted. So that was a big bonus for the students. Another big bonus is the feedback is if you set up a rubric. You can see here I've got a list of all the questions, and if we viewed the longer description, it pops up with the model answer, how much that question's worth for each section. But at a glance, students can see, question 1A I only got 2 out of 3, question 1B I got 2 out of 2, question 1C, and so on. So they can very, very quickly see what they got right, what they got wrong. Sometimes the cryptic comments that turn up on a handwritten one are much harder to decode than that. So that's much easier for the students to see where they've got right, got wrong. And of course you can write cryptic comments, but they're typed generally. You do have a facility to draw with your mouse or a stylus and write things, but highlighting areas with a little comment is easy peasy. So this means if students submit stuff as a PDF, boom, you can mark it online. The interface is pretty painless to use, and you can provide things to students very, very quickly and painlessly, and they all have access to the feedback they need. So those are 2 tools for giving fast feedback to students, and I'm going to sit down and shut up now.
Okay, well, my name's Alan Toy. I'm from the Commercial Law Department. And I'm going to be talking about CrowdMark. You might have heard about this before because Andrew Eberhard is truly the champion of CrowdMark in the business school and maybe in the university. It's a system of, well, I kind of call it a word processor for marking. So, I mean, we heard about the distinction between research and teaching earlier, but when I'm writing my research articles, I use a word processor. I don't write them by hand. When I was marking, I was writing it by hand. I was using a red ballpoint pen. I was writing all over the student's script. And so in the commercial law department, we have multi-page answers. So I was writing a lot of comments in different pages and hunting through the pages to find where the students had written the answer to my question. CrowdMark is a system where it's a QR coded assessment system. So it uses these little codes on every page of the student's script. I've got 172 students. I printed 200 answer booklets, and so we had 1,600 of these unique codes because every single page has a unique code on it. CrowdMark doesn't do multi-choice. It doesn't read anything for you. It doesn't mark multi-choice. So in my test, I had 10 multi-choice questions and 2 written questions after that. So the 2 written questions are question 11, which is a 3-page space for the answer, and question 12, which also has a 3-page space. In addition to that, there's an overflow page at the end. The students can't exceed this. So in the past, commercial law department's been quite happy to provide additional answer booklets. If the students exceed 20 pages, they can go over and write another 8 pages, another 8-page answer book. They can't do that with this system. So with this system, you're producing a customized answer booklet. You're giving the student some guidance. Well, this is a question that could really be answered very well in 3 pages. Or if you need the overflow page, you can do that. You probably won't. Out of my 172 students, the 163 that sat the test, only about 10 used the overflow page and nobody exceeded that. So no one was asking for any extra paper. They were all able to answer it in the space provided. What can be a little bit of a pain with the system is if the students answer it in a different space. Last semester, some students did things like cross out question 11 and write question 12, which would have worked using the old system, but under this system it's a little bit more of a pain. This system really just, when you're marking it, presents to you the pages just for that question. So when I'm strip marking down question 11 for all of my students, I'll just see the pages for question 11 there. And so I don't really want to be seeing that. So what I did this time, and this worked perfectly, was I said, well, what I did last time, which didn't work at all, was I said, I'm not going to mark that at all. If you put that in the wrong space, I'm not going to mark it. But they kind of called my bluff on that one. And I just couldn't do it. So this time, this worked. I said, all right, if you do that, there's a penalty of 20%. And it worked perfectly. So it's a good system. It's efficient. It presents the pages that you want to see. It takes off the students' names. You only see this cover page once, which is when you're matching the assessments. And you don't see it after that when you're marking. So it's impartial. There is a bit of setup time with CrowdMark. For every 100 students in your course, the setup time is roughly 1 hour. And so the setup time involves scanning the scripts. It involves, once you've got that electronic file, it involves uploading it to CrowdMark. And then you've got to match the assessments. You've got to tell CrowdMark which student's email address corresponds to that particular script that they answered. Did they answer 200, and which student actually answered script number 200? So, however, I managed to push some of that off onto examinations. Examinations scanned my exam for me. I didn't have to go up there. I didn't pick up anything. They just sent me the file. I'm hoping in the future to convince them to possibly do the uploading and matching for me as well. So the setup costs are substantial in terms of that time, but at the end there aren't any costs. There aren't any costs of checking. It's very obvious which pages have been marked. It goes green on the grid. So you can see exactly which pages have and haven't been marked. There are no errors there. There are no errors in adding up. CrowdMark does that for you. So you don't have to do all that kind of checking and stuff that you would normally have to do. It's also more efficient in the marking process itself, because we often write quite lengthy comments in commercial law, and it will auto-suggest. If you type like just 3 letters of a comment that you've previously given to another student, it will auto-suggest the ones where you've got those 3 letters in. So you can click, if it's the same thing that you want to say, you can click on that, it will just put that comment in. So it's substantially more efficient. It's like using a word processor to just make the process more efficient. You don't have to hunt through the script to find where they've answered your question. It's there. It's speeded up my marking process quite significantly, and it's allowed me to provide more detailed, individualized feedback to a higher degree than I could have done before. With the same time, in fact, I'm spending a lot less time marking now than I used to do, and I'm providing much better feedback. So it's a good system. It's now integrated with Canvas. Happened just a few days ago. So that was a big thing actually, because in the old days I needed the help of John, who was very capable with Excel. I'm not, but just moving from CrowdMark to Canvas used to be a bit of a pain. Now, because it's integrated, it will extract all of the students' email addresses from Canvas. And Andrew and I haven't tested this yet, but we're hoping that it'll be able to put those grades back into Canvas. It's not easy to do. But now that that's integrated, the system is very easy to use. It's very user-friendly. I'm not particularly IT savvy. I mean, even Excel was a challenge for me, but I could do it easily. I mean, if everything you need to do, there's a big box, it takes up basically most of the screen, and that's what you need to do. You need to click on that or something like that. It's just a simple system to use. I use this primarily for tests that are administered in an exam-like setting. You can also use CrowdMark for assignments. I haven't ever used it for that, but it's possible for that to be done as well. But for tests, it's very good, and especially if you've got a large number of markers, they can all mark at the same time. What happens is when you upload these to CrowdMark, it goes to the cloud. So anyone can do that. I have only used it from my university computer, but I presume people can use it from their home computer anywhere you've got internet access. Everyone can mark at the same time. There's no danger of losing any scripts. There are no boxes of marking that have to be transferred. There's no physically carrying anything. What it does mean, though, is that you have to mark it on the computer screen. So that's, if you don't like marking on the computer screen, that might be an issue for you. It's not a case of easily being able to print them out and mark them. It doesn't happen with CrowdMark. So if you are comfortable, like I am, with reading things on a computer screen, then that's fine. I find that the speed and efficiency that it gives me is worth it. That's a decision you'll have to make. So that's it from me, and I'm happy to answer any questions and discuss it.
Okay, thanks everybody for that. Okay, many thanks for sticking to time there. I know how difficult it is because these assessment tools that we're using are really quite complex. It's easy, isn't it, to go on about all of the detail of it. But we wanted to use this time now to for questions and discussion about the rationale behind choosing some of these different assessment tools, and this is an opportunity for you to ask the panel why they chose it, will it work in your practice, and so on. So it's open to the floor now for questions.
Or silence, whichever you prefer.
Canvas speed grader, a large word assignment, I use Turnitin and Grade Marker and rubric within that. One of the things I've got is speed grader is you can't set up a bank of responses, can you? Or can you?
Not as far as I'm aware, so I haven't used it as a bank of responses. So I was listening to Crowdmark going, ooh, bank of responses.
Yeah, it's just like an autotext sort of function, because Turnitin allows you to have your grade marker bother.
I was just listening to all those rationales of using those optimized markers and going back to the rationale of having students handwriting their answers on a piece of paper. I was just wondering why. Is it because we don't have enough computer? So that we can't ask them to type their answer in the computer and get feedback and optimize the extraction of answers in marking?
I think it's to do with discipline. So we come from the School of Medical Sciences where there's a lot of diagrams that students have to draw or explain and annotate. So if you try to give students, try to get them to draw a heart, it can be difficult to label the details digitally. So, and I know, Peter, from engineering, there's a lot of maths and equations and workings that students may be asked to do.
Yeah, and certainly you don't want to be doing equations in Word. It's incredibly painful and time consuming.
But if you did have solely text answers and you had a secure computer environment, yes, that would be possible. Preferable nowadays, I would suspect. And you can say.
Leslie is experimenting with online examiners.
We do that for you. The group needs to follow how a student can understand each other, so chat, send answers.
That would be preferable. We don't have a lot of diagrams. I mean, well, if you're using Crowdmark, you can obviously you can put any diagrams in there, or the students can draw diagrams easily, but since we just have written text answers, then students typing their answers on a computer would probably be preferable, given, you'd have to have the right number of computers available, and I guess that would be a challenge in the current situation, but if you did have those kind of secure computers, then typing the answers would probably be preferable to them writing the answers.
I think it was with Remark where you showed the statistics around the validity of questions. Do teaching staff use that information to evaluate how well the tests are?
Yeah, variably they do. There's an MCQ results. It's a very basic statistics, but the first thing that most people do is scan down the difficulty and validity scores. And if there's anything with a negative validity score, that question is highly suspect. And often it will mean they've actually put the correct answer wrongly in the database.
Model answers, yeah.
So just correct that. Or the staff will discuss it and say, actually this is a bad question, let's delete it. It's a very simple mechanism to just change one character in your input file and it remarks it, deleting that question. So it's mostly used for that. Some people use it from year to year to look back at what questions were really good questions from previous years. Can I reuse those or tweak them a little bit? Which ones were not good and I don't want to reuse those.
And Canvas Quizzes has a similar sort of validity score, and you can also get histograms of how many answered A, B, C or D on a multi-choice question, say. And that can be really useful to go, oh, lots of people got this one wrong and they all seem to be thinking the same wrong idea here. Maybe I should talk about that in class and address that a bit more.
Just some comments about the tools for marking assessments. I think the technology you presented serves different purpose. it's maybe good to, I think you have done combine two technology together to actually mark one assignment if they have two parts like multiple choice and the written part. And I think another comment is, I think this area is growing as well, because maybe you heard about the automated marking for the written part. I mean, the multiple choice part already been automated, but the written part, I think the machine learning is actually helping teaching staff to mark the written part as well, to analyze the written. If the machine can read the text, they can analyze the weakness and the which strong part in the written, and then they give you some suggested comment. I'm not sure how good is it. So, yeah.
Yes.
I've got a question for Pia. We've used rubrics in speed grading. I'm not sure if you used rubrics in Trinity. And
No, I haven't.
how easy did you find it to set up a rubric?
Not too painful, and the more time you spend in setting up the rubric, the better the experience for the student. So you can set up a rubric which is just part 1 is out of 10, part 2 is out of 10. That doesn't tell them nearly as much as if you say instead of part 1 is out of 10, you drill down and there's 2 marks for this and 3 marks for this and 1 mark for that. So the finer grain you go, the better the experience, and because at that point you might not even need to write much in the way of comments. So if they can see they got 1 out of 1 for this and 0 out of 1 for that, they know exactly what they've got right or wrong. And I didn't click into it, but we do have the model answers sitting in the rubric as well, which you don't have to do that, but I think it's quite nice for them to see the model answers, and they can just click in if they want to see them, and that helps them get an idea of, oh, that's what I should have been heading for. I got 0 out of 1 for that. Here's what I should have written to get 1 out of 1 for that.
The Canvas quizzes, there's an earlier comment about giving feedback about the area to reconsider as opposed to just the answer. In Canvas quizzes, can you have one or t'other?
So you can, for every, say you've got a multi-choice question, for every single option you can add a comment that will be displayed if students choose that option. So you can have it displayed on a per option basis. If they answer A, they'll see this text. If they answer B, they'll see this text. You can also choose just to have something displayed if they get it right, or something displayed if they get it wrong. So you've got quite a lot of control over what they see based on what they select.
A question, Alan, you said you're not a techie and so you're not used to sort of using a lot of technology. How long did it take you to learn how to use the systems that you use?
CrowdMark was a bit of a challenge. I ended up doing things like typing into Google, how do you do this in Excel? So I kind of taught myself a bit of Excel. There were still things I needed Chun to help with. But that should be all gone now with the integration of Canvas and CrowdMark. So in the early days, it was a challenge. And it's also a bit of a challenge if you've got colleagues on your courses that are not comfortable with marking things on computer screens. I've tried to tell people a lot about. I've tried to tell a lot of people about CrowdMark, and I often get people looking at me like I'm fiddling some kind of witchcraft. But it really is useful. I find it very good.
So now that your colleagues have marked online, are they converted or?
Not so much. Not as much as I am.
Can I just add, in an earlier session on CrowdMark, Andrew described the team, his marking team's experience, and they moved from paper-based marking to CrowdMark as a trial, as a pilot, and they wouldn't go back to paper after that. So I think it's the unknown, it's that fear of the unknown, and once you do try it, a lot of people can see the benefits and they don't want to go back to the lugging the paper around, etc.
Yeah, I would never want to go back. I mean, Tessa showed us the medieval lecture. I call the old system of marking the medieval system of marking, so I wouldn't want to go back to that.
And whether you want to be on screen or paper is a little bit dependent on what kind of device you have. So when we're using SpeedGrader in one of our courses, that you have the markers the option of would you prefer to mark paper or electronic, because a third of the students had submitted online, they'd been given the option. And one of them was very, very happy to, because he had a nice tablet computer with a stylus, he found it very easy. The other two weren't so keen, so they got the paper-based ones. So if you've got something like a Microsoft Surface Pro with a tablet pen, that's really, really awesome, then you can literally just sit there and annotate and tick and cross like you would on paper. Whereas if you happen to use a mouse to do that, it's a little bit more painful.
Can I just make a couple of comments about MCQ results and OMR? MCQ results, the advantages are you can get the information for staff very quickly, and the big win is that you can feed back to students. In terms of ease of use, lots of people around the faculty are using it. I'm reasonably technological savvy, as is Angela, but lots of people who aren't. And the feedback I get is almost always not, how do you do this, but can you get it to do this for me in the future? So it's really simple and easy to use, and the feedback is great because the students get it quickly, but it's also great for staff because I don't know what other faculties are like, but we have some people in our faculty who are anal about their questions, and they won't allow them to be public domain. So they wouldn't feed back questions and answers from a multiple choice test, but they will feed back learning points, and that's really valuable. OMR, the advantage for us is to be able to distribute pages among multiple markers, and to collate the results without having an administrator manually entering them into a computer. So that speeds up things, it takes away some of the error possibilities, but it does have a disadvantage of being commercial, so you have to buy it, and it has a little bit more setup time. You have to be a bit canny about how you design your tests. But once you've done that, you've got a big win there, and with Angela's pushing, we're now feeding back, as I said, results to students, feeding back their papers to them after we've marked them, which is really valuable in terms of seeing what's gone on.
So the remark is also enabling us to mark anonymously, or strip mark, as someone else mentioned, and that's becoming more of a, the unconscious bias, awareness of the unconscious biases is becoming quite topical around the university. So I think buying into that is quite a good, alerting our staff to unconscious biases is quite a good forward-looking move as well.
Okay.
Kevin?
I just thought we'd clarify about CrowdMark. So currently we're looking very closely at all these tools. CrowdMark we have a business school license for, so it's not university-wide at the moment. But we're certainly looking at it as a solution. The other point about the integration is that it works the other way. Andrew can help me here, but we haven't integrated it into Canvas. It's integration goes there. Yeah.
All right, lovely. Thanks for that clarification, Kevin. Okay, Bettina's just going up to the front because when we all met a couple of weeks ago to talk about this panel session, we were trying to produce some sort of output from it to help people compare the differences between all of these different tools, and for you to then work out which one might suit you. So we've got a couple of outputs which we're going to offer you from this. These are available electronically and on paper, because we know some people prefer paper, and that's down here at the front. But Bettina's designed this one, which is a pictogram, which I think works beautifully, and she's just going to sort of briefly describe this to you so that you can see in terms of making choices what might work for you.
So what we're describing here at the top layer is the student and how the assessment takes place. So you'll see that Remark, MCQ results and CrowdMark are manual assessments, whereas SpeedGrade and quizzes are online. The next phase, that's a late model scanner. It's very fast. So for MCQ results and CrowdMark go into the scanner, and then they meet the lecturer who kindly marks an A+. And you'll see that the students are awfully pleased with that quick feedback. In the Remark, which is slightly different, the marking takes place before scanning, and then there's a little bit of work that goes online and then out it goes to the student. Quizzes, automated, the marker is absent. And this whole process, we have a very kind lecturer who is comfortable with A+, and our students are A. So they're just to help you think through what our panel has described today, and we do have handouts out front here, if you'd like.
Lovely, thanks for that, Bettina. Okay, so that's a summary, and they're available electronically and on paper. So if you want to take one of those away, then obviously feel free to do so. My thanks to the panel for this session. I'm sure if there are any specific questions that you want to ask, they'll be happy to receive emails from you. There you go, just landed it in.